Application reverse engineering. If you can analyze an entire network protocol just by looking at the transmitted data, then your analysis is quite simple. But that's not always possible with some protocols, especially those that use custom encryption or compression schemes. However, if you can get the executables for the client or server, you can use binary reverse engineering, RE, to determine how the protocol operates and search for vulnerabilities as well. The two main kinds of reverse engineering are static and dynamic. Static reverse engineering is the process of disassembling a compiled executable into native machine code and use that code to understand how the executable works. Dynamic reverse engineering involves executing an application and then using tools such as debuggers and function monitors to inspect the application's runtime operation. In this chapter, I'll walk you through the basics of taking apart executables to identify and understand the code areas responsible for network communication. I'll focus on the Windows platform first, because you're more likely to find applications without source code on Windows than you are on Linux or macOS. Then I'll cover the differences between platforms in more detail and give you some tips and tricks for working on alternative platforms. However, most of the skills you learn will be applicable on all platforms. As you read, keep in mind that it takes time to become a good reverse engineer, and I can't possibly cover the broad topic of reverse engineering in one chapter. Before we delve into reverse engineering, I'll discuss how developers create executable files and then provide some details about the omnipresent x86 computer architecture. Once you understand the basics of x86 architecture and how it represents instructions, you'll know what to look for when you reverse engineering code. Finally, I'll explain some general operating system principles, including how the operating system implements networking functionality. Armed with this knowledge, you should be able to track down and analyze network applications. Let's start with background information on how programs execute on a modern operating system and examine the principles of compilers and interpreters. Compilers, interpreters, and assemblers. Most applications are written in a higher level programming language, such as C, C++, C#, Java, or one of the many scripting languages. When an application is developed, the raw language is its source code. Unfortunately, computers don't understand source code, so the higher level language must be converted into machine code, the native instructions the computer's processors execute, by interpreting or compiling the source code. The two common ways of developing and executing programs is by interpreting the original source code or by compiling a program to native code. The way a program executes determines how we reverse engineer it. So let's look at these two distinct methods of execution to get a better idea of how they work. Interpreted languages such as Python and Ruby are sometimes called scripting languages because their applications are commonly run from short scripts written as text files. Interpreted languages are dynamic and speed up development time, but interpreters execute programs more slowly than code that has been converted to machine code, which the computer understands directly. To convert source code to a more native representation, the programming language can instead be compiled. Compiled programming languages use a compiler to parse the source code and generate machine code, typically by generating an intermediate language first. For native code generation, usually an assembly language specific to the CPU on which the application will run, such as 32 or 64-bit assembly is used. The language is human-readable and understandable form of the underlying processor's instruction set. The assembly language is then converted to machine code using an assembler. For example, Figure 6-1 shows how a C compiler works. To reverse a native binary to the original source code, you need to reverse the compilation using a process called decompilation. Unfortunately, decompiling machine code is quite difficult, so reverse engineers typically reverse just the assembly process using a process called disassembly. Static versus dynamic linking. With extremely simple programs, the compilation process might be all that is needed to produce a working executable, but in most applications, a lot of code is imported into the final executable from external libraries by linking, a process that uses a linker program after compilation. The linker takes the application's specific machine code generated by the compiler, along with any necessary external libraries used by the application, and embeds everything in the final executable by statically linking and any external libraries. This static linking process produces a single self-contained executable that doesn't depend on the original libraries, because certain processes might be handled in very different ways on different operating systems. Static linking all code into one big binary might not be a good idea because the OS specific implementation could change. For example, writing to a file on disk might have widely different operating system calls on Windows than it does on Linux. Therefore, compilers commonly link an executable to operating system specific libraries by dynamic linking instead of embedding the machine code in the final executable. The compiler stores only a reference to the dynamic library and the required function. The operating system must resolve the linked references when the application runs. The x86 architecture. Before getting into the methods of reverse engineering, you'll need some understanding of the basics of the x86 computer architecture. For a computer architecture that is over 30 years old, x86 is surprisingly persistent. It's used in the majority of desktop and laptop computers available today, although the PC has been the traditional home of the x86 architecture. It has found its way into Mac computers, achievement consoles, and even smartphones. The original x86 architecture was released by Intel in 1978 with the 8086 CPU. Over the years, Intel and other manufacturers such as AMD have improved its performance massively, moving from supporting 16-bit operations to 30-bit and now to 64-bit operations. The modern architecture has barely anything in common with the original 8086 other than processor instructions and programming idioms. Because of its lengthy history, the x86 architecture is very complex. We'll first look at how the x86 executes machine code, and then examine its CPU registers and the methods used to determine the order of execution. The instruction set architecture. When discussing how a CPU executes machine code, it's common to talk about the instruction set architecture, ISA. The ISA defines how the machine code works and how it interacts with the CPU and the rest of the computer. A working knowledge of the ISA is crucial for effective reverse engineering. The ISA defines the set of machine language instructions available to a program. Each individual machine language instruction is represented by a mnemonic instruction. The mnemonics name each instruction and determine how its parameters or operands are represented. Table 6-1 lists the mnemonics of some of the most common x86 instructions. I'll cover many of these instructions in great detail in the following sections. Instruction description. Move, destination, source, moves the value from source to destination. Add, destination value, adds an integer value to the destination. Sub, destination value, subtracts an integer value from the destination. Call address, calls the subroutine at the specified address. GMP address, jumps unconditionally to the specified address. RET returns from a previous subroutine. RETN size returns from a previous subroutine and then increments the stack by size. JCC address jumps from the specified address if the condition indicated by CC is true. Push value pushes a value onto the current stack and decrements the stack pointer. POP destination pops the top of the stack into the destination and increments the stack pointer. CMP value compares value A and value B and sets the appropriate flags. Value B tests value A, value B, performs the bitwise AND on value A and value B and sets the appropriate flags. And destination value performs the bitwise AND on the destination with the value or destination value performs the bitwise OR on the destination with the value. So destination value performs the bitwise exclusive OR on the destination with the value. SHL destination and shifts the destination to the left by n bits, with left being higher bits. Its SHR destination n shifts the destination to the right by n bits, with right being lower bits. INC destination increments the destination by 1. DEC destination decrements the destination by 1. These mnemonic instructions take one of three forms depending on how many operands the instruction takes. Table 6-2 shows the three different forms of operands. Table 6-2 entail mnemonic forms number of operands. Form example: 0 name POP, RET. 1 name input push 1 semicolon call func. 2 name output, input MOV EAX, EBX semicolon add EDI, 1. The two common ways to represent x86 instructions in assembly are Intel and AT&T syntax. Intel syntax, originally developed by Intel Corporation, is the syntax I use throughout this chapter. AT&T syntax is used in many development tools on Unix-like systems. The syntaxes differ in a few ways, such as the order in which operands are given. For example, the instruction to add 1 to the value stored in the EX register would look like this in Intel syntax: add EAX, 1, and like this in AT&T syntax: add L $1, percentage sign EAX. CPU registers. The CPU has a number of registers for very fast temporary storage of the current state of execution. In x86, each register is referred to by a 2 or 3 character label. Figure 6-2 shows that the main registers for a 32-bit x86 processor. It's essential to understand the many types of registers the processor supports, because each serves different purposes and is necessary for understanding how the instruction operates. Figure 6-2, the main 32-bit x86 registers. The x86 registers are split into 4 main categories: general purpose, memory index, control, and selector. General purpose registers. The general purpose register EAX, EBX, ECX, and EDX in Figure 6-2 are temporary stores for non-specific values of computation, such as the results of addition or subtraction. The general purpose registers are 32 bits in size, although instructions can access them in 16 and 8-bit versions using a simple naming convention. For example, a 16-bit version of the EX register is accessed by SAS, and the 8-bit versions are A, H, and AL. Figure 6-3 shows the organization of the EX register. Figure 6-3 EAX general purpose register. Small register components. Memory index registers. The memory index registers ESI, EDI, ESP, EBP, EIP are most general purpose, except for the ESP and EIP registers. The ESP register is used by the push and pop POP instructions, as well as during subroutine calls, to indicate the current memory location of the base of a stack. Although you can utilize the ESP register for purposes other than indexing into the stack, it's usually unwise to do so because it might cause memory corruption or unexpected behavior. The reason is that some instructions implicitly rely on the value of the register. On the other hand, the EIP register cannot be directly accessed as a general purpose register because it indicates the next address in memory where an instruction will be read from. The only way to change the value of the EIP register is by using a control instruction, such as call, jump, or RET. For this discussion, the important control register is E-flags. E-flags contains a variety of Boolean flags that indicate the results of instruction execution, such as whether the last operation resulted in the value 0. These Boolean flags implement conditional branches on the x86 processor. For example, if you subtract two values and the result is 0, the 0 flag in the eFlags register will be set to 1, and flags that do not apply will be set to 0. The eFlags register also contains important system flags, such as whether interrupts are enabled. Not all instructions affect the value of eFlags. Table 6-3 lists the most important flag values, including the flag's bit position, its common name, and a brief description. Table 6-3 important eFlags, status flags, bit name description, 0 carry, indicates whether a carry bit was generated from the last flag operation. 2 parity flag, the parity of the least significant byte of the last operation. 6 0 flag, indicates whether the last operation has 0 as its result, used in comparison operations. Sign flag indicates the sign of the last operation, effectively the most significant bit of the result. Overflow 11 overflow flag indicates the last operation overflowed. Selected registers. The selected registers CS, DS, ES, FS, GS, SS adjust memory locations by indicating a specific block of memory into which you can read or write. The real memory address used in reading and writing the value is looked up in an internal CPU table. Note: selected registers are usually only used in operating system specific operations. For example, on Windows, the FS register is used to access memory allocated to store the current thread's control information. Memory is accessed using a little endian byte order. Recall from chapter 3 that little endian order means the least significant byte is stored at the lowest memory address. Another important feature of the x86 architecture is that it doesn't require its memory operations to be aligned. All reads and writes to main memory are on an aligned processor architecture, must be aligned to the sides of the operation. For example, if you want to read a 32-bit value, you would have to read from a memory address that is a multiple of 4 on aligned architectures such as Spark reading an unaligned address would generate an error. Conversely, the x86 architecture permits you to read from or write to any memory address regardless of alignment. Unlike architectures such as ARM, which use specialized instructions to load and store values between the CPU registers and the main memory, many of the x86 instructions can take memory addresses as operands. In fact, the x86 supports a complex memory addressing format for its instructions. Each memory address reference can contain a base register and an index register, a multiplier for the index between 1 and 8, or a 32-bit offset. For example, the following MOV instruction combines all 4 of these referencing options to determine which memory address contains the value to be copied into the EAX register. MOV EAX ESI plus EDI times 8 plus 0 times 50. Read the 32-bit value from memory address. When a complex address reference like this is used in an instruction, it's common to see it enclosed in square brackets. Program flow.